I still love the game so much that I can endlessly pop it in, beat it that same day, and have a grand old time. It's not too short to where I find it mindless, but not too long to where I don't want to see it through. A game which you'd think I would be bored of after all this time, but I'm not. The game had such a distinct appeal and legacy, which, if anything, I'd say proved that Sonic wasn't just a product of his time. The 90s cool factor of Sonic the Hedgehog was something that could be expanded, something to show that the franchise wasn't cool because it rode trends or anything, it was cool by being itself. It was about the heart. For Sonic Adventure 2 to be the culmination of everything one of the most important video game franchises would strive towards, that is why it's one of my favorite games of all time. And it's not impossible for it to be outdone.
I loved both Sonic Adventure and its sequel back on the Dreamcast, and while a big part of that belongs to nostalgic memories, I will still argue that these games were important because they are what stood Sonic the Hedgehog out as a character beyond others like Super Mario. The thing that I definitely understand is that the adventure games were not perfect. They were far from it, but I still think both games are good. They just get a bad rep these days from harsh criticism, critiquing them as if they were made in 2018. Some of their flaws can be exaggerated, but I do know that there is a lot to be desired because of that old age within the games. But remakes could fill in those voids. A remake for Sonic Adventure, and even its sequel, could really be beneficial towards making them so much better. Not only would remakes be a good chance to go in and fix their flaws, but it could be a good chance to redefine the games entirely. There is just so much potential. I even have my own ideas as to how they could approach remaking the Sonic Adventure games, and may even do a separate video on that. Hey everyone, it is Nux, and today I am here to talk about yet another possible game that could be remade in the future, and how I would personally go about remaking it. In one of my last videos, I talked about Sonic Adventure, one of my all-time favorite Sonic games, and talked about how I would handle a remake in very deep detail, to the point of even mentioning how I would market it. Yeah, while I won't be going that deep into detail again, I do have a lot to say about today's hypothetical remake, which will be covering the game's direct sequel, Sonic Adventure 2. And there's as much, if not even more, to cover. Many of the ideas in this video will be carried over or heavily based on the ones from the previous video, so I highly recommend watching that video first if you haven't already. But this time, I want to do things a bit differently. You see, Sonic Adventure 2 isn't as nostalgic as Sonic Adventure for me. So maybe this remake topic might be slightly out of my comfort zone, which is why today we will be having a special guest. Introduce yourself, my fellow Sonic fanatic.
Sonic fanatic, huh? Hi, I'm Jeb, known by many as the Black Hooded Gamer. Others know me as the local Sonic Adventure 2 freak, so it is of course a pleasure to be here.
And I'm glad to have you here, man. It's good to talk about Sonic with other people, instead of constantly rambling on about it by myself. I swear I think it messes with my sanity. But anyway, if you don't mind, how about we outline some guidelines based on the last remake video?
Alright.
So firstly, I want to specify that our ideas are a mix of our own ideas and inspired by some other ideas out in the wild too. Meaning that the changes we will make in this hypothetical remake are based on our own individual perspectives of the game. So a lot of our personal opinions are present. Try not to be too offended. Also, the following ideal remake we are imagining is within our own little dream bubble.
Yeah, because otherwise we'd only be here for 5 minutes.
Yeah, because it'd be a very different game to say the least. Oh yeah, guess I should also clarify that this is a remake and not a remaster, as there is a difference between the two. And that this SA2 remake would be a separate game from the SA1 remake. It wouldn't be packaged together with it like how the Crash Remake trilogy is all packaged together. This is so that both remakes can reach their full potential and be completely reworked from the ground up as separate games in order to accommodate for the strengths and weaknesses of the individual games. Alright Jeb, without any further hesitation, you ready to go?
That's more than enough for an introduction, so let's get the show on the road!
So first things first, we should probably come up with some possible names for this remake. In my last remake video, I definitely wasn't creative with my names, and it's not any better here. The only ideas I got is stuff like Sonic Adventure 2 Final Cut, or Sonic Adventure 2 Ultimate Battle, or just Sonic Adventure 2 Ultimate. Heck, maybe we should just call it Sonic Adventure 2 Battle Deluxe Director's Cut Ultimate Edition and call it a day.
Well, I could see it being done if we're being honest.
Yeah, but I guess thinking of a really cool name isn't our strong suit, so maybe we should move along to the real meat and actually dive into the game itself. So our first category is the gameplay for the remake. And for the general gameplay, it will be kept the same and be mostly similar to the original game, where it is fully 3D and contains absolutely no mindless boosting through most of the level or stiff 2D sections. Basically, have it be the 3D adventure gameplay we all know and love. Nothing else. Period. Did I forget to mention something?
No wisps.
Oh right, I didn't even think to mention that in the original Sonic Adventure remake video. Dang it, now if Azuko follows that video, he'll put Wisp in the remake. Well, at least I can say now that yes, there would be absolutely zero Wisp in that remake or this one.
But in all seriousness, how about control? Luckily, the adventure games are prime examples of good 3D control, so I don't have to waste too much of my breath here. But one thing that I think really needs to be a standard now is full camera control with the right analog stick. The original only let you move the camera with L and R, but even then, if you were a speed or mech character, it would completely reset the moment you began walking. And aside from character-specific control changes we may bring up later, another good universal change would be separate buttons for different actions, such as the light dash, the spin dash, and somersault or bounce. They could also do the same with sunglasses and treasure scope. A major problem with Sonic games up to Unleashed is that they love to map multiple things to one button, and this can lead to a bit of that archaic frustration newer players have while playing SA2, not to mention it being a really annoying aspect of the Chao Gardens.
Yeah, with Sonic Adventure 2 especially, while the control was very manageable, the multiple actions to one button thing could be annoying for when you want to do a specific and precise action. So fixing that would be very ideal. And I also think all that other stuff you mentioned makes a lot of sense as well. So that's the general control, but we should dive into the real meat of the gameplay topic, the characters and their individual workings.
Yes, now I think the original story structure was very unique and I wouldn't change it at all. The theme of the game is hero versus dark, and the way the characters interact basically mandates that it be left in two teams, with them both converging in the last story.
Yeah, the story mode as it was in Sonic Adventure 2 was pretty great, and aside from some changes to the story itself, which we will cover later, I also think it worked just fine. But while the story structure is fine, in a remake, we gotta tackle the elephant in the room when it comes to gameplay. The speed, mech, and treasure hunting stages, which are known for being a bit controversial in the community to make a long story short. Many people say that Sonic Adventure 2 is only 1 out of 3 ways good, and well, how do you feel about that?
I think if I went into how I felt about that, I would say some really mean things.
I don't know, man. I mean, you're on my channel, and at this point, I'm pretty sure people are used to me saying mean things when it comes to Sonic. So I say, go ahead and let loose.
Oh. Well, to make this short, I think it's hyperbolic, surface level, and stupid.
Well, I guess we can be big Sonic meanies together then. But back on topic, I personally think that the mech and treasure hunting stages have some room to grow, but they are not as bad as people make them out to be. But before we open that can of worms, I guess we can start by tackling these speed stages.
That should be easy. I think we basically agree that Sonic & Shadow's gameplay in SA2 was pretty good, so it would basically be the same, but we would polish up things such as rail switching or ring dash consistency. Also, occasionally Sonic & Shadow would get stuck on level geometry a bit, which could really disrupt the flow. If I slightly touch a wall in this remake, I would hopefully just lose a little bit of momentum and not be stopped dead in my tracks.
Yeah, the speed stages can basically be very similar to their original counterparts. Just have them polished up with new details and whatnot, and if they want to make it easy for themselves, the groundwork can be based on the engine that they would use from a Sonic Adventure remake first. Though they'd have to tweak it a bit, since Sonic Adventure 2 has a bit more of a fast-paced action design than Sonic Adventure. Another thing that I never mentioned in my Sonic Adventure remake video was that the Lightspeed Dash in that remake should probably be more like the SA2 Lightspeed Dash, where you just tap a single button as opposed to charging up a good few seconds and then using it. But maybe people are nostalgic to the original Lightspeed Dash and would want to keep it in the Sonic Adventure remake, so I don't know. Either way works for me in terms of that game. But in SA2, it'd definitely have to be the improved Lightspeed Dash. Okay, so since we are pretty even on the speed stages, I guess we can move on to the mech stages. And,
Oh boy.
Yeah, we're now diving into the controversial gameplay styles. And while I'm partially kidding on that, these styles truly do have quite the divisive takes throughout the community. With the mech style, while I don't think it's as bad as some people say, I do still have my own personal gripes with the gameplay. For starters, why is Tails in his tornado mech for most of the game? I understand that it does show off more of Tails' mechanic capabilities, and especially due to the fact that he was able to even build something like it in the first place. But at the same time, I feel like it takes away from his iconic core stylish gameplay where he was known for flying and attacking with his two tails. Like, it would be like if Luigi's most iconic properties were replaced with him in a Gundam or something. It doesn't even help that we see him outside of it in stuff like Chao Garden and a few of the cutscenes. Like, I don't hate the idea of the mech per se, but I just personally agree with some people that he maybe shouldn't be in a mech for most of his gameplay. And if it were up to me, in a Sonic Adventure 2 remake, I would personally have his gameplay more based on his Sonic Adventure gameplay, where he travels by foot and relies more on his flight. They could design levels that require timing Tails' limited flight abilities in order to get through the stage, and to deal with enemies and his battles with Eggman, he could rely on a hand laser cannon or something, like the one he uses in Sonic Battle. This idea would basically be like if Tails' Sonic Adventure gameplay and Gamma's Sonic Adventure gameplay had a baby, combining elements of the shooting from Tails' original Sonic Adventure 2 stages with his more core gameplay that he has in most other games. But that's just me at least. The only time he might need his mech is for the racing stages, but besides that, no mech for me. Well, not entirely. As for Eggman, I have no issues with him. Eggman primarily going through stages in a mech makes total sense, as that's what he's known for, his robotics. That, and I don't think I could ever see this game the same if Eggman truly ran his stages on foot. My only gripe with Eggman's stages though is that some of the level design of a few of his stages does feel a bit clunky, and not as exciting as it could be. I want Eggman's levels to have a more smooth flow to them, like Gamma's levels did back in Sonic Adventure. Besides that, I have not much else to say. How do you feel about this, Jeb?
Well, to offer a bit of a shocking contradiction, I would still leave Tails in the mix so that he could retain his rivalry to Dr. Eggman, and to minimize inconsistencies between the two playthroughs. I place a lot of value in the hero and dark aspect of Sonic Adventure 2, the idea that the two stories are two sides of the same coin. To change that, for me, would be one of those changes that make it not SA2, you know? While I never took any issue with their speed, perhaps the mechs could move faster to feel more inclusive as a Sonic playstyle. The main reason why they were clunkier in SA2 than 𝗲𝗲 was in SA1 was because they would take a moment to accelerate. This buffer in movement was made so that they could aim in place better. In SA1, if 𝗲𝗲 wanted to aim elsewhere, his entire position would have to change, although you could get around this by jumping. In this remake, they could add a strafe button to make Tails and Eggman shoot straight ahead while still being able to move. Of course, this is also with a better camera in mind. If not that, I would even suggest additional abilities to vary their approach, such as a shield or a dodge boost, especially since the other playstyles have more to do than press B at enemies. Again, they have plenty of buttons to use, why not make the most of it? Then again, maybe for some people that'd be too complicated. At any rate, I thought the original Tails and Eggman handled just fine. I was always going where I wanted to go when they were under my control, so it needs to be just as good, or better, for the remake to work. As for level design, I don't have much I could alter. Certainly nothing much like 𝗲𝗲 because I find his levels really short and easy.
I think those are some pretty fair points in favor of the mech stages in Sonic Adventure 2. Again, just so people don't kill me, I don't hate the idea of Tails being in a mech. I just think that it's weird that his gameplay in a direct sequel to Sonic Adventure doesn't really match up. But in terms of fitting the hero versus dark theme, it does make more sense. Plus, keeping the mechs mostly similar to how they were in the original game is obviously less work. So I wouldn't be surprised if in a real remake, that's what would be done, because it's ideal.
That's understandable. I'm not going to pretend that I didn't play SA2 before SA1, so my perception of Tails is a tad different. But your idea is probably more appealing to people.
I don't know, I guess it just really comes down to what you personally prefer. Well, since we at least can understand where we each come from, I guess we can agree to disagree and move on to the final core gameplay style, being the treasure hunting stages, and really, I don't have too many issues on these.
Of course, neither do I. In fact, I quite like them. In Sonic Adventure, I felt that Knuckles controlled great and had an interesting gameplay idea, but his stages felt really shallow and would typically last like 2 minutes. So in SA2, I liked the various ideas presented, with things like the Headquarters Beetle, the Pumpkin Hill Mountains, the entire big area of Meteor Herd. Really, the only stages I felt were obnoxious were Death Chamber and Mad Space. Death Chamber because it's an enclosed maze that doesn't allow Knuckles to quickly get around like the other more open levels, and Mad Space because of a terrible gravity controls and, you know, the issue I'm sure everyone will bring up.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that perspective on the stages. Though if I had to add another stage to the list of stages that can be annoying, it would definitely be Security Hall, for its really dumb time limit.
I'm good with doing Security Hall in 5 minutes. I'm not good with how Eggman gave me 15, but I still have to do it in 5. Bah, Rouge and her self-confidence. I guess Aquatic Mine is also a little much, but then again, that level only feels problematic when the Emerald Shards spawn in the hard-to-reach hallways, which wouldn't be much of an issue if... do you want to take the floor for this one?
Gladly. You see, that one wouldn't be as annoying if it weren't for the nerfed Emerald Raider from the original Sonic Adventure one. And for those who don't know what we're referring to, we're talking about how in Sonic Adventure 1, the Emerald Raider can detect multiple emeralds, but in Sonic Adventure 2, it only tracks one at a time. Which I feel that if there's one major change that these stages need, a better Raider would probably be for the best, as it's a common gripe.
Personally, I feel like it's not that big a deal because if you use hints when you're stuck, it should work out fine, but that's the key thing, when you're stuck. And you'll get stuck easier when your radar isn't detecting all 3 emeralds. Of course, the 3 hints you get will be focused on 1 emerald, and that's why the radar only detects 1, so in my ideal remake, hints would not only factor into all 3 pieces, but the radar would as well.
Yeah, and that is a good point about the hint system. But in the end, I think we can both agree on the fact that the Raider would still need at least some type of improvement from the original one in a remake. Well, alright, That about wraps up the main free styles and the 6 characters from the original game, but since this is a remake and not just a remaster, that means we could add more to the characters and gameplay. So, any particular ideas on that?
I guess one issue I had with the story is that Amy didn't do anything.
Now that you mention it, she appeared throughout the entire game and we only see her doing a handful of things in the story. And with how involved she was with the story, she could have been a playable character as well, which isn't a bad idea. If we're going to add some new characters into the game, Amy could actually be a really great addition since she already had a prominent role in Sonic Adventure 2 anyway.
But it's not like there's anyone on the dark side who has the same role. Who would be there to rival her?
A good point. But looking back to my Sonic Adventure Remake video, I might have a potential candidate for that role. That being Metal Sonic. Which, yes, seems a bit strange at first, but he wouldn't entirely come from nowhere. In Sonic Adventure, he appears within the tube tanks in Amy's flashback, showing that he clearly is still acknowledged. And because of that, in my Sonic Adventure Remake video, I suggested that Metal act as a post-unlockable character where Eggman slowly trains him to get back in action and face Sonic again. In the Sonic Adventure 2 remake, he could be a part of the main story as another member to Eggman's team, being the most loyal member since unlike Shadow and Rouge, he won't have an ulterior motive. Though his contributions to Eggman's schemes in this game would basically just be cover for Rouge and Shadow. So that way, he doesn't entirely steal roles and overshadows, well, Shadow. And in terms of rivaling Amy, it strangely works well due to that whole kidnapping past between them. Amy's role can have her nonchalantly tagging along for the ride and running into Metal at various points, beating him in battle to show that she isn't afraid of him anymore. Which also would be a nice follow-up to her character arc in Sonic Adventure, where she says she wants to be more useful, well, aside from that moment where Eggman takes her at gunpoint.
Oh, yeah, maybe when she's wandering about while Tails is in Eternal Engine, she can, get into a fight with Metal Sonic, causing Eggman to find her and have that scene from the original play out. Stuff like that to explain what she's doing while all the major story bits are happening.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to really get her more involved with Sonic Adventure 2's plot, and also fit Metal Sonic in there as well. The only question now is how would the two factor into the gameplay segments of the story mode? With Metal Sonic, while he'll have a decent presence throughout the game overall, I see him best working with 2 stages and fighting Amy at least twice. Once on Prison Island before Sonic shows up to tell her and Tails about the island's explosives, and another fight on the Space Colony arc to fit in line with your idea of how Eggman finds her. And after Amy beats him for the last time in the story, he can go into sleep mode for the rest of the story until after the end events. As for where Amy could fit, she could have about 2 to maybe even 3 stages. One of them can be on how she gets the key card to unlock Sonic's jail cell, and another could be in moments where she's split up from the group, like on the arc, or when she's escaping the police like Tails is.
So then, how would they play? After all, they were both playable as speed characters in the original Sonic Adventure 2 multiplayer.
That's right, they would be playable in full stages, so they would need a full direction for their gameplay. And with Amy, I don't know. I never liked how she played within the multiplayer of the original Sonic Adventure 2. And she would probably need a bit of changes anyway, since she would need more depth. If they wanted to make it easy, they could probably just base her on how she was in Sonic Adventure, especially since, presumably, a Sonic Adventure remake would be done first, and her structure would be complete. But yeah, Amy has always been a weird character when it comes to her playable roles. Metal Sonic, on the other hand, is easier to imagine. Like I said in my Sonic Adventure Remake video, he pretty much can just mostly play similar to Sonic, just with unique animations, sound effects, and voice clips. If they want to give him his shield mechanic from the multiplayer, they can, but either way, his stages will basically just be new speed stages. So pretty much they could just add Amy in the hero story, add Metal into Dark story, and just reorganize the story slightly to fit these characters in. And besides that, I don't think the main story needs any other major additions in terms of gameplay. Any last thoughts?
I guess I don't have any other ideas. This is the most I'd ever think to do as far as adding any major new ideas to the core game. It's definitely a larger discussion in a realistic sense.
Yeah, but we would probably be here forever if we truly dove into all of that. So I think that wraps up the gameplay segment. And we can move on to the next one. And the most logical next topic to cover should be the world and level design.
The world? Like the hub world? Or lack thereof?
Yeah, cause like the original game, this Sonic Adventure 2 remake will stay faithful to the original and will not have a big hub world. All levels are simple stage to stage, and we mainly keep this element because it's something that we know people like about Sonic Adventure 2 in comparison to Sonic Adventure. If you've seen my Sonic Adventure remake video, you know that I personally prefer my big open 3D hub worlds. Hence why for that remake, the hubs would need to remain intact. But I still respect those who prefer Sonic Adventure 2's direction.
I think for the respective stories the two games are trying to tell, this structure is kinda necessary. I could not imagine a Sonic Adventure without hub worlds, nor a Sonic Adventure 2 with them. For example, I don't think they'd want to alter it to where you go explore Eggman's Pyramid Base as a hub world right after the heroes decide to rush in there during this 24-hour time limit.
That's a good point, because the stories being so different does also factor into how their worlds are portrayed. That being said though, I still have my preferences for hubs. But again, no hubs in our ideal remake for this game. Not like I have many ideas for whole new Sonic Adventure 2 themed hub worlds anyway.
As for the action stages, obviously I'm not going to ask for a whole lot of changes to the original. I think if the radar and hint system are reworked to a more agreeable compromise, more cramped areas like Aquatic Mine and Death Chamber will be just fine. Mad Space could also use a few changes, like obviously fixing the janky gravity. Maybe they could also make it a bit more clear to players that the hints are messed up or that you can pause to check them, little things like that. Otherwise, maybe I'd add some more enemy types to deal with. It'd spruce up the mech stages a bit. I also think that the set pieces of those levels, such as the drill from Cosmic Wall, could be amplified to be a little more fun, a little more destructive. Yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, me too. As I pretty much agree with all of those fixes. All of the original levels just simply need to return with those very reasonable major improvements to their level design, and presentation too for sure. A very similar case being for their other alternate missions as well.
Oh yeah, alternate missions. I wouldn't change too much there, but I imagine if the Emerald radar was adjusted, they may need to tweak the hard modes for Knuckles and Rouge. Either way, those missions were pretty bleh in the original, so they could stand to be updated with less cryptic but still challenging Emerald locations. I'd also make it to where Eggman and Tails will hopefully not get sniped out of nowhere while collecting 100 rings, but yeah.
All valid points. Pretty much just keep most of the original levels the same in structure, but just change up their level design and presentation. As mentioned earlier, I wanted to add Amy and Metal Sonic as additions to this game in the story mode, so they will get their own levels, which will be new to the game. I already briefly touched on the story time potential of these levels, but when it comes to the specifics of the level gameplay, I draw a bit of a blank. There's a lot of directions they could go considering the various gimmicks of Sonic Adventure 2. They would obviously need to fit the gameplay direction of their character, but otherwise, this is a free court of potential ideas.
We could have a level where Amy gets the prison key card, we could have one where Metal Sonic distracts Gun, something like that. As we mentioned earlier, it's kind of a larger discussion. We're not exactly concept artists or a fan project, so I don't have a whole lot to offer besides basic ideas.
Me neither, so I think it's safe to say we're done there. But yeah, I think that covers every level. Let me just double check the list here, and oh no.
Green Hill Zone?
Green Hill Zone. So yeah, I kinda forgot that the final unlockable bonus in Sonic Adventure 2 was a fully 3D Green Hill Zone remake. Sonic Adventure 2 was an anniversary title after all. Here's the problem. If my annoyed tone didn't give it away, I'm hesitant to put Green Hill Zone in yet another Sonic game. But at the same time, I don't know what else to do here if we did replace it or something.
I mean, I wouldn't take it out or anything, but you know, you can A-rank Green Hill Zone in the original SA2 and get nothing for it. So what if you A-ranked Green Hill and got some super duper unlockable, like Super Sonic or Super Shadow? It'd feel a little weird that they get something while the other characters don't, but I can't see Tails busting out the Chaos Emeralds in his mech or anything like that.
That isn't a bad idea. Seeing how in my original Sonic Adventure remake video, I did say that Super Sonic would be the 100% final unlockable. So it would make sense to give out a similar reward for a similar task. So if we go by that logic, I guess Green Hill Zone can stay, though how do we do it this time? Do we go for something, you know, like the retro purposefully blocky look like in the original version of that stage? Or maybe something more updated?
Well, yeah, I guess an update akin to Generations would do. We've seen Green Hill in both retro and updated formats before, so I think we may as well go with the one that looks really nice.
Yeah, the Generations incarnation did look really good, and assuming the remakes would look as good as we want them to, this could be a chance to make a definitive clean version of the classic stage, despite how overused and tiring it is. I guess the plus is that it will be fully 3D again, but otherwise it's just Green Hill. Bleh. So the next topic to tackle is bosses. And like with Sonic Adventure 2's bosses were just okay. The designs and concepts of the boss battles were cool and all, but the actual fights were just mediocre. Some of them are definitely a step up from the Sonic Adventure ones, but others fall short, especially the character battles.
The character battles are all I'd really change. I've always thought the final battle between Sonic and Shadow was pretty good, and I wish more of the character battles were like that. The first Sonic vs. Shadow isn't very engaging, Tails vs. Eggman is just a war of attrition, and Knuckles vs. Rouge was kinda lame as well. I guess it comes down to them being too easy. I'd want something that would make your opponent feel equal to you, the player. Give them new attacks, new cues, new ways to defend themselves. It's a pretty consistent issue from Adventure 1 to 06 that the rival battles just aren't very good. Aside from that, I guess I would maybe tell the players that they can go under the final hazard to switch characters. The major bosses are fine, and luckily they matter most.
With those existing bosses, the structure of a number of them are pretty great, like the final Shadow vs. Sonic fight like you said. But then you have something like Knuckles vs. Rouge, which just overall feels like it could have been something much cooler to show off their skills. So basically just keep the general designs and premise of all the bosses from the original, but just polish up the actual execution with some new ideas maybe, just like I suggested for the Chaos boss fights in Sonic Adventure. There's a lot of possibilities in expanding these boss fights. Which also reminds me of the potential of new boss fights. Really, the only new bosses that would be added are ones relating to Amy and Metal Sonic, since they are new additions to the story mode. Amy and Metal can have two specific boss fights against one another, one where she faces him head-on while on Prison Island, and another encounter aboard the Ark where the fight plays out more like the famous, or infamous, Stardust Speedway fight, as a nice reference. Again, the main reason that I would have these fights in this way is to tie together the connection between the characters from Sonic CD, and loosely continuing from that theoretical Sonic Adventure remake. It's all a full circle. I was originally considering having Sonic get in a fight with Metal Sonic for that extra fan service, but decided it wasn't necessary here since Shadow is his main rival in this story. Also, Metal Sonic fighting against a gun robot himself would also make for a good boss fight, to show off his strength as well, and show that he is playing a part in covering for Eggman's group.
But would they be a part of a last story? Or would their lower amount of screen time not warrant that?
I didn't think about that all too much. With Metal, I envisioned that he would basically go out of commission in both Hero and Dark Story after his fight with Amy. In the Hero story, you just see Amy getting away. But in the Dark Story, it shows Eggman finding Amy through Metal Sonic and being surprised, and also probably disappointed in Metal Sonic's failure. So he wouldn't make it that far, sadly. But Amy is tough to call though, because she was kind of there for the final story, but also not really.
Again, a new idea we're kind of just throwing out there. I think it could be cool for continuity's sake.
Yeah, I should probably stress that I'm no professional writer, so I wouldn't take all these ideas as the definitive way to handle this, but we'll touch on more of the story soon enough, because we should probably touch on a few other areas first before we get to that. So Jeb, in my Sonic Adventure Remake video, I briefly discussed the subject of possible difficulty modes. What do you think of that?
I mean, Adventure 2 already had hard missions, but hey, I think plenty of people here could use an easy mode.
Or game journalist mode, as I would call it. But in all seriousness, it's a possibility, but I no longer see it as something that would be necessary, so I'll go 50-50 for that one. So now we move into the visual presentation of this ideal remake. And in terms of the visual look of the game, like I said in my Sonic Adventure Remake video, this is probably the area where Sega can't mess up too badly, right?
They could always place Minecraft trees in City Escape. Nah, but in all seriousness, I think as long as it follows guidelines more akin to how Sonic Unleashed looks, it'll be good. The characters in their current day forms all look fine, maybe I'd make a few adjustments to their proportions. I liked how Knuckles used to look a lot more than I do now. He had dreadlocks rather than a mop on his head, but it works. Obviously the characters would also look a bit more beefed out with the upgrades too, so I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Just make it HD and make it good. Just as long as Sonic still has his soap shoes, I'm good.
Oh god, I'm glad you mentioned the infamous Minecraft trees from Sonic Forces and Sonic Lost World, because yeah, that's my biggest fear in terms of a modern remake of this game. The game looking super plastic and clay-like, nah, we got remakes of the Sonic Adventure duo, and especially Sonic Adventure 2, the games would need a more refined and clean style like the one presented in Sonic Unleashed, which side note, it's sad that Sonic Unleashed is still the best looking Sonic game over the last decade or so. But yeah, besides our nitpicks, it is not hard to improve from both Sonic Adventure games in look at all, considering their funky early 3D era look in the original versions. Basically just give Sonic & Co. a nice HD tone, which isn't necessarily hyper realistic, but just not plastic and overly bright. The look of Sonic and his friends in an ideal remake wouldn't be too hard to imagine, but I have an interesting question for you, Jeb. How would you personally tackle the human characters? For those who saw my Sonic Adventure Remake video, you'll know that I had my own idea of how to do the humans, which was basically just making them a mix of the Sonic Unleashed humans with the more realistic ones from games like Sonic 06 or Super Mario Odyssey. Still somewhat cartoony in look, but with realistic proportions, as I hated the bobblehead look of the Sonic Unleashed humans, but yeah, what's your take?
I think Unleashed is a good template for how to do humans in Sonic. Maybe dial it back a bit, like you said, don't have them look like really goofy, but I think the idea is that they should look in line with Dr. Eggman. For example, I think the way the Gun Commander looks in Sonic Chronicles of Dark Brotherhood is good. I'd do something like that. In Shadow the Hedgehog, the president has some zany limb proportions, so he was kinda cartoonish. Just give me something that looks kinda stylized like that, you know? Don't do something that's completely abstract and nonsensical, but also not something super realistic and out of place. That's what I'll say on basically everything, not just for humans.
Yeah, that's really all we asked for. A very well refined, stylized, and HD looking game. That's all we ask for when it comes to the looks of these remakes. For them to look like a high budget 2020 or beyond game, despite the games being from a decade or two ago. This would also go for the in-game cinematics as well, because, like I said in my Sonic Adventure Remake video, the in-game cutscenes would need to be completely redone, not only to update their look and execution, but to accommodate for the changes we'd make in this remake. But updating them is still pretty important, as they need to look smoother and less stiff in movement. add a lot more polish into the expressions so that it's easier to get a read of characters' faces without them looking a bit goofy. Sonic Adventure 2 was less infamous than Sonic Adventure for crazy faces, but still needed work on capturing the emotions of the characters better, especially since the game is quote-unquote more serious.
Yeah, obviously turn the music down, remove the awkward motion capture while still obtaining movement fluidity, stuff that just seems like common sense for cutscenes now. Although personally, I think characters interrupting one another in some cutscenes is fine. It makes it feel more natural since typically it's during a less civil discussion. At the very least, keep it in for moments like, "I'll make you eat those words." It's not authentic without that.
I guess the problem with the interrupting sentences in the original Sonic Adventure 2 was that it sounded like they were interrupting each other because of colliding voice lines than it being intentional. So I'm not entirely sure on how I feel about that. But everything else makes perfect sense, especially for stuff like the overpowering music or off lip syncing. I should also mention while we're on this topic that the full CGI cutscenes should once again be done by 𝗲𝗲𝗯 Animation Planet Incorporated, the guys who usually do CGI work for the Sonic series. Though I would hope their style for these cutscenes matches with what we would want out of the ideal look of the game. So, is there anything left in the presentation field that I'm forgetting, Jeb?
I guess what's really important is that we get some new Yuji Iwakawa artwork. That would be amazing.
Yeah, and he still does Sonic artwork to this day, so he could play a big part in making promotional art for these remakes. And he could even design art for the game as a whole. I feel like Sonic games having a really stylized artwork direction is something the series has been missing for years, so having him back would be really great. Know what else has been missing from Sonic? Good story. Yeah, not my most smooth transition, but whatever, yeah, we're talking about story now.
But Nux, it's a blue hedgehog running fast. Story doesn't matter at all, so this remake should just be a bunch of silly jokes about how bad the originals were.
Well, of course, in any other Sonic game in this day and age, this would totally be standard. But not in our remakes. Because, seriously, what I said for Sonic Adventure's story in the potential remake of that, and my video on it, would apply here. The general story structure of the original Sonic Adventure 2 plot will remain the same. We want this story to not be meta or self-aware, full of tiring jokes and unnecessary changes, but an adventure with twists and turns taking place in a self-contained world, just like the original story.
The original story is still remembered by people to this day, and I think it'd be a betrayal to heavily alter it so that it could adhere to some Sonic should be for kids agenda. For me, that really goes for any new Sonic game, but especially a remake. I want them to feel passionate about the game they are revamping.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that with the remakes of the adventure games, it is more important than ever to understand what made those games appealing. And the story is a big part of that, where the stories of those games were really entertaining and were among one of the biggest highlights of those games. I miss when Sonic stories took themselves seriously in the world building sense, and also had some kind of effort into their writing. Now, that's not to say that these stories were masterpieces or perfect, because we all know that they were far from it, but we still want the basis of those stories intact. But before we tackle possible changes to the story that we would like to see, there's one elephant in the room that we have to address first: the voice actors.
Yes, let's talk about how they fail so badly. Yes, let's discuss how we would ideally cast these characters in the Sonic Adventure 2 remake.
Yeah, and it's definitely another of those elements that is controversial, but not as much between us adventure fans, I guess. Because I think you and me, at least, can agree that the current cast is not good. Well, most of them anyway.
I think they're all fine actors, just not a fan of them as my favorite characters. Especially when they get used to portraying the meme versions of these characters, as seen in Sonic Boom, Sonic Twitter Takeovers, Team Sonic Racing. Stop me anytime now.
Yeah, which is also my biggest problem with the modern era. Sonic evolved into a series that doesn't really take itself seriously. and that reflected into the new cast, where a lot of them tend to have a less specific take on the character, and not just in the performance, but in the actual voice of the characters. It's no secret that my biggest problem with the modern Sonic cast is that so many of them just do not sound like the characters. And not only that, but it feels like none of them necessarily care for or understand the characters all that well. They just deliver the line that needs to be delivered, and the voice director just leaves it at that, even if the line didn't sound right. I'm sure that a guy like Roger Craig Smith is doing the best he can with his performance of Sonic, but I'm sorry, he just does not sound like the character of Sonic to me. Sonic is a character who is energetic and young sounding, with of course a slight bit of pitch due to his hedgehog stature. Sonic not sounding right is a big reason why I just dislike the current direction of the games.
Basically, if it were us, and I know this sounds harsh, but we would not retain any of the current voice actors. I have always felt that the current actors are far more mainstream, and as such, they've never really grown with or understood the Sonic characters they were portraying. For that reason, we would want as many of the Adventure 2 actors to come back as possible. Ryan Drummond for Sonic, Scott Dreyer for Knuckles, David Humphrey for Shadow, that kind of deal. Much like how Tom Kenny came back to portray Spyro in the Reignited trilogy. For characters like Eggman and Tails, they would need to have new actors since their 2001 actors are either no longer with us or have grown up. But at any rate, it's still better to get new talent that can truly replicate the feeling those characters gave rather than new actors who I, and many others, would not be able to take seriously. In my eyes, if you're going to recast a character, they should either sound close enough to their original counterpart or sound better than their original counterpart.
The thing is, some of the characters aren't too bad, and I could picture them doing the dialogue from the two adventure games decently. Examples of this being the modern voices of Tails or Rouge, since their portrayals are at least still within the boundaries of the characters. The problem is, a majority of the modern cast just does not work. Sonic, Shadow, Amy, and Knuckles would absolutely need new or veteran voice actors, because their current ones would not do adventure lines well, at all. Even with someone like Mike Pollock, the way he voices Eggman nowadays just isn't compatible for the direction that Eggman took in Sonic Adventure 2, whereas in Sonic Adventure 2, Eggman was more determined than ever to take over the world, and you can hear it at multiple points in the story through his voice, where Eggman is very precise and menacing in his tone. Pollock's Eggman has just kind of faltered from that, due to voicing Eggman in things like Sonic Boom, where Eggman is anything but serious. And you could blame it on voice direction, but even when directed to sound slightly more serious, the actors still can't quite hit those same highs because of how used to the new voices they've given these characters. An example would be how Knuckles sounds in Sonic Forces, where they try to make his voice sound deeper and serious, but it still doesn't quite work. And it still sounds like the jock Knuckles from Sonic Boom. For this main reason, this is why we would mostly wipe a clean slate and just bring in veteran or new voice actors.
So at that rate, would we change anything about the characters themselves, or maybe the lines they'd have to redo?
In a remake, definitely. Because as we touched on earlier, we would add a lot of changes to the game, what with ambitious ideas like adding whole new characters. So the story would be no exception to the changes, despite how similar we want it to the original. And mainly because of the fact that there's both a lot of changes and not a lot of changes at the same time, if that makes any sense.
For starters, to improve the story, it'd be best to fix strange mistranslations such as, "Is that what chaos control is?" or "Now I know who you are. You're that government spy, Rouge the Bat, aren't you?" It's a little thing, but it can go a long way.
Right, there's actually quite a few lines that would need altering from the original in some form, and for that reason, we would obviously need some new voice lines, which is why I spent some time talking about an ideal cast. The story dialogue had a lot of highlights, but it also had some moments that either didn't come across right, in the English dialogue at least, or just could have been better. It wasn't as bad as some moments of Sonic Adventure, but nonetheless, in this remake, we would pretty much clean all the dialogue up in any positive way. But the new lines wouldn't just be for improving the flow of the original storylines, but also we would add new dialogue to accommodate for any story changes we would want. So I guess on that topic, we can talk about in what ways we would change the story from the original, which may be hit or miss with some of you, depending on how much you'd want the original story untouched.
Me, personally, I have little issue with the original story. A point I commonly think back to, however, is Rouge's alliance with Dr. Eggman and how little it is questioned. Never once does she comment on how the moon was blown in half, and never once does she get confronted about the destruction of Prison Island. The problem there is that if you elaborate on that, it directly reveals that she's working with the president before it's supposed to be revealed in the story. So I'm not sure how exactly I go about that. Thoughts?
Yeah, that's probably one of the bigger actual plot holes in the original story. The story of Sonic Adventure 2 didn't have as many plot holes as people like to make out, but this one was definitely one that stuck out in my mind. And the more I think about it, the more it makes sense, but as for how to fix it exactly, I'm not so sure. Part of the reason that they don't mention Rouge's relationship with Gun early is because it's one of the story's big reveals, so I imagine it would be hard to slide in a fix for it.
Only thing I could think of is to have her maybe get chewed out by her mysterious ally on the walkie-talkie after the Prison Island incident, or maybe to have her get visibly shaken up by the destruction of a moon, something subtle to indicate that these acts were either intentional or accidental on her part.
I think that sounds like the most natural way to go about fixing it. It wouldn't intrude on the story of the main game, and it wouldn't raise more questions than answers. However, another plot hole that is often pointed out by fans is the plot hole where the military mistakes a blue hedgehog for a clearly black and edgier one. Now, some have suggested ways to fix this one, including myself, but I honestly think that it would be less of a headache to just leave it as it is. And I know it is one of the more dumb elements of Sonic Adventure 2, but maybe just have the footage that Gun captures of Shadow be a silhouette as opposed to a full render that's easily distinguishable. Maybe Shadow is moving so fast that they mistake it for Sonic because, well, you know, Sonic is fast. Otherwise, I think that one is fine. Any other story elements you think should be fixed?
Nope, I can't think of anything. As I've said, time and time again, I think the original story really is underappreciated and gets many details nailed down to a T. Those which aren't, I feel we've addressed fine enough here. Some may see it fit to elaborate a bit more on the process of the Eclipse Canon's reprogramming and Shadow's brainwashing, all of which could be added, but that vagueness also added to the intrigue of the original plot. If anything, I'd maybe throw in a few small references to Professor Gerald's happenings in Sonic Battle or Shadow the Hedgehog, but that'd be pretty ballsy, I imagine.
Yeah, because on the one hand, I think that referencing other Sonic games past Sonic Adventure 2's time could be pretty neat foreshadowing and an interesting idea, showing that maybe Gerald inspired Eggman more than we originally thought. But on the other hand, the last thing we need is Sonic Team using this as an excuse to slide in references or things going on in the current era. The Sonic Adventure purist deep within me is partially what makes me this close-minded, I'll admit. But I definitely would not want things like the classic Sonic Dimension or the Wisp being referenced in this story at all. Please no. But yeah, I agree on mostly everything there. Of course, to wrap this up, there's a few things left to discuss, and that's the content that would be added in regards to the new characters of the story mode. Going back to Amy and Metal Sonic, obviously we would need entirely new cutscenes for the elements that show off more of these characters, like a cutscene showing Amy encountering Metal before a fight, or cutscenes establishing Metal's standing within the story. Things like that would be important. And for Metal Sonic, when he does eventually get defeated for the last time, maybe show a scene of Eggman briefly being disappointed and insulting him. A tension that could lead to his grudge against Eggman, which basically leads into the events of Sonic Heroes, which speaks for itself almost. Only other thing I could suggest is maybe a post-credit or secret unlockable scene of Metal upgrading into his Neo form somehow. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, stuff like that, which could really tie up the continuity even more. Not sure if you're trying to hint at a Heroes remake here, that'd be the day. But anyway, again, I just asked for the original Sonic Adventure 2 plot, but touched up to be more enticing to newer players. Speaking of the word enticing, do you think they should remake the music too?
That's a very interesting question. Because as you may or may not know, I was mixed on remaking music when it came to Sonic Adventure, due to how much the original soundtrack means to me. And it's more so the case with Sonic Adventure 2 as well, because I think the original soundtrack is one of the best in the series, and I'm fearful to how a remade soundtrack would stack up to it.
I mean, obviously I wouldn't keel over if the original music were left untouched, but I would also appreciate the efforts being made to reimagine the music too. So in that regard, the safest option would be to faithfully recreate the music, and if people don't like that, give them an option to use the original soundtrack as well. Of course, they need to make something new for Amy and Metal Sonic stages, but yeah.
Oh right, I didn't think about how they would need to get new music for the new characters and their new stages. And it would be kind of weird to blend music of a new style with the old tracks, so maybe remaking the OST would be ideal in that sense. It's also funny because I even mentioned this idea of blending old and new in my Sonic Adventure remake video, so I think I can mostly agree, especially for tracks like the cutscene music. I have to wonder though, would they change up the Knuckles raps from the original soundtrack? 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝗕 doesn't exactly have the best rap sheet these days, and I'm curious as to if they would need his permission to use his lyrics again. I also don't think they would go back and hire him to redo his lines either. Luckily, the instrumentals of those raps could suffice on their own, but still, makes an interesting topic to think about, especially with other veteran artists too.
I imagine Amy could have music that reflects the genre her theme song goes for, and Metal Sonic could, I don't know, get some cool Sonic CD synth or something. Actually, now that I think about it, he may even need a new theme because everybody else would have a vocal track but him. Music is better heard than described, I'm sure you get what I mean.
Oh, I definitely do. So I think it's safe to say that we covered mostly everything important on the music front. If we missed anything, just feel free to let us know in the comments or something. Alright, so in my Sonic Adventure remake video, some people noted on how I didn't really come up with any crazy ideas for multiplayer and kinda gave it a back seat overall. This is because I wanted Sonic Adventure as a remake to be more single player focused, what with the hub worlds and all that stuff. But since Sonic Adventure 2 doesn't even have hub worlds and is a bit more arcade-like than Sonic Adventure, I think this game could be perfect to receive a full-on multiplayer mode, very similar to how it was in Sonic Adventure 2 Battle.
As long as they tweak the character balance a bit, I'm already pleased. But to take it a step further, how about full online functionality? Bring back all those downloadable Dreamcast costumes, make new costumes, even one for the alternative characters. Actually, it'd be really cool if we could unlock all that stuff in the single player too. Ah yes, I can see it now. An angel or devil skin for 𝗃𝗲𝗄𝗎.
Yeah, I would mostly be okay with it working the same way as within the original multiplayer, but just bigger and more refined, with things like online and new costumes and all that other stuff. The ability to play as any character would also be really cool as something that could be in the stage select and not the main story, which leaves just one tiny thing left. The Chao Garden. In that Sonic Adventure remake video, I didn't really say much on Chao Garden because I didn't really play it much compared to the main campaigns of the adventure games. But it's a good thing I have help this time, so Chao Garden, how would you handle it in the remakes, Jeb?
I feel like most would agree that if a Chao Garden came back, there's still a lot of expansion that could be done. The original was already ambitious enough with the many intricacies in raising Chao, but I know many people who would love to connect with others online to race or interact with their Chao. They could include new minigames, much like how Sonic Adventure 2 Battle did with Chao Karate, and as one last thing, I'd love to be able to go into the Chao world with alternate costumes or characters. Basically, if they can make it the most customizable experience possible, I'd like it to be so.
That all sounds good to me. My big thing with these remakes is improving content from the originals and adding in new content, So if the Chao Garden can follow through with that, it would fit in line with everything else. And, wow, it looks like we are at the final stretch for the video. I think we tackled most of the major topics to cover for a Sonic Adventure 2 remake, so now I guess we should just wrap up any loose ends we have here. This should be pretty standard, but the extra challenge stuff from the original game, such as the ring missions and the Find the Chao missions, should obviously return.
Yeah, all of that's still good. I'd maybe alter some qualifications for certain missions to make them more straightforward to play, but otherwise I think SA2 already had a respectable amount of optional content.
Yep, and that's what made the game so good. It was, and still is, easily one of the most packed games in the Sonic series, content-wise. And the fact that a remake could add so much more to it is a crazy thought. But that's how we would want the remakes to be. Improve what the games already had and add more. That alone would make for a satisfying remake. They could add some additional bonus content like maybe concept art or something like that, but all the latter stuff we already talked about is good enough. So, is there anything at all that we are possibly forgetting? I feel like we covered everything.
Nope, I think we're good. Wait. Big the cat.
What? Oh yeah, Big is in this game. So yeah, the Big the Cat cameos. Despite my feelings of how the character is used these days, I think that cameos can stay.
Just don't try and push it, please. I want to go out of my way to find silly cameos. I don't want Big being slammed right in my face asking about cookies or some shit. Oh, but if you want to make him playable in the mech form as he was on the Dreamcast, that's also cool.
I didn't even know he was playable in the original. I just remember the cameos, but yeah, don't shove Big in our faces. Let the story be able to present itself as great as the original was. But alright my friend, it looks like we have finally reached the end of this Sonic Adventure 2 remaking journey. I enjoyed talking about this game again.
As have I. Again.
Yeah, I know this isn't your first rodeo, but now that we're done, why don't you tell the people where they can find you here on these vast plains known as the internet?
In the links below. If you want, you can follow me, Jeb, on YouTube and Twitter, where I be myself, I guess.
Yep, I'll have links to all of Jeb's stuff in the description. And again, it was a blast to finally do a proper collab. So I'll see you later, man, and thanks for all the help.
Sayonara, Nux. I'm sorry, I'll go now. Bye!
Well then, that's all the time we have then. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like the video and leave a comment with your own thoughts. I would prefer reasonable feedback, but it's a free internet, so whatever. And of course, subscribe for more videos like this one and to stay updated on when I'll put up new ones. This has been Nux, and I'm out. Peace.